Do we really want to achieve results? Do we want to project our brand of politics? Do we want to project our ideology? Even though in today's world, ideology now counts for nothing because parties seem to have moved to the center of the ideological divide. And so the difference between parties, the differences are no longer as sharp as they were 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So you will have to decide what exactly you want. What is it you want to project? What is the image you want to project? Unfortunately, in these days of television, these days of aesthetics, that also becomes important.
You are somebody who always advocates for good governance, right? Good governance. Do you see that with the numbers that your party has in parliament, we're going to see a rubber stamp kind of parliament where the government, no matter what they want to do, can, push their way through? Even if it's an amendment to the constitution, they still have the numbers of the 2/3 majority of parliament to push it through anyway, except one that has to go through a referendum. I mean, the president literally has the power to push anything that he wants to push, through parliament. So within the vein of corporate governance, do you see that this is going to be a rubber stamp?
No, it wouldn't. You see, the NDC, it is not for nothing that the NDC is a Congress. So it comes with various nuances, various collegiates within the Congress, various shades of opinion. So even within the party, they will have to judge on ideological, on nationalistic, on other platforms and other issues. So the NDC is not a monolithic party. And that is why we consciously call it the National Democratic Congress, a Congress of ideas.
Right. So you believe that
yes,
this majority is going to do right by the people who put them there.
Yes.
And not be a rubber stamp of anything that government wants to push through.
It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be. And it is not the nature of the leader of the party to be autocratic. That is one advantage we have. President Mahama, by his nature, is more consultative. He's not an autocrat.
Right.
And so that helps. Remember when the NPP had a 169, the sort of autocracy that was visited on Parliament, and they didn't have the 2/3. But again, the nature and style of leadership. The John Mahama style is one of a collegiate system, where at serious discussions, he sees himself only as the first among equals. For example, his last cabinet, of which I was a member, he did not impose his will on cabinet, even though cabinet is advisory to him. He's not bound by the advice of cabinet. By our constitution, cabinet is advisory. And yet, anytime he came to cabinet, we engage in vigorous discussions, and sometimes some of us will even oppose his initial view, and he will find a way of bringing everybody around. Remember, the NDC is left of the center party, and we have the principle of democratic centralism. At the point of taking decisions, we can all argue from different perspectives come from, but when we finally coalesce around a decision, then we are all bound by the decision, and that is what the beauty about democratic centralism.
Right. So recently we've seen, a lot of people being appointed as heads of various state-owned enterprises, state-owned institutions. There's a committee that you chaired, that had a supervisory role of ISOEs, some of these entities. So from where you sit with that background, are you confident of some of the people who have been sent to some of these institutions?
Well, we have a challenge in our body politic in terms of appointments, especially of directors of state-owned entities. I will prefer a day when we adopt something similar to the Namibian system, where anybody putting himself or herself up for directorship has to write and pass a certain test. So there's a database of people who have written and passed that test. And then the government picks from within that box. You see, if you take some of the technical areas, you don't necessarily have to be a technical person. If I had my way, for example, no medical doctor, unless he or she has been trained in management, business management, who head Kolebu, Konfanoche, Tamale, or any of the teaching hospitals. Because they are really business units. Their business is providing healthcare, but they are business units, and so they must be run as businesses. You don't have to be a surgeon or the chief surgeon to run a hospital.
Right.
It is bad. You must be a manager to run a hospital. So in some of the technical areas, we tend to promote technical people to head those technical organizations. And quite often that does not necessarily work well, because technical people tend to have a unipolar vision. Running an organization, you must have a higher overall view.
You must have
best
different perspectives.
Rather than, and so if you take the Ministry of Health, for example, no medical doctor has ever been a successful health minister. Some of the best health ministers, they say, have never been medical. Kenneth Solomon, my good friend, late Kwabena Donkor, Major Kwashiga. Some of the people that health professionals mentioned, none of them has been a health professional. So again, it is leadership, it is management, and we have a fundamental problem with state-owned enterprises, and I believe until we diagnose and get the right solutions, we'll go round in circles. And it is my prayer that this time we'll get it right. It is not always the personnel, but it is the system we create. Do we believe in a systems methodology? Or institutions are run by personalities? If we have a systems methodology, then the average good manager you put there will be successful because the structures are in place.
And the systems work.
The systems work. But if it takes the strength of character to drag an organization along to success, if you are not there,
then what happens to the organization?
So those are some of the structural problems. And then we as a people must also decide what exactly we want to do with state-owned enterprises. And we have categories. Unfortunately, we box them together. There are state-owned enterprises. There are other state entities. There are majority owned and joint ventures. There are minority joint ventures. And unfortunately, if you look at dividends, for example, the last year that the state-owned report is available is been 2023. The 2024 one will come out probably the middle of the year or later. Those entities in which we have minority shares have provided the most dividend to the Ghanaian state. have to ask ourselves questions. Why do we set up some of these entities? If they are meant to be commercial, what has to be the yardstick? If an organization can make so much profit and yet pay so little to the Ghanaian state,
so little dividends.
Some don't even pay at all. In fact, let me give you an example. In 2023, only TDC and Ghana Reinsurance, which are 100% state-owned, paid dividends to the Ghanaian state.
Only those two?
Only those two. TDC paid 5 million cedis. Ghana Re paid 1.2 million.
I mean, and that's not even so much.
That's not even so much. That's not even so much. And yet, we got 4 companies, just 4 companies, the Ashanti Goldfields, Africa Reinsurance Corporation, GHOne, and one IDA, in which the state had minority interest, paid as much as 477 million cedis dividends to the Ghanaian state. Ashanti Goldfields and Goldfields Ghana. This is just 4. So again,
and the government has minority stake
in
those ones.
The
ones where there is majority stake are not making any.
So we ask ourselves, what is it exactly we want? We must always go back to the 7-year development plan of our great former President Kwame Nkrumah. In the 7-year development plan, the reasoning was that Ghanaians didn't have the capital to set up some of these entities. So it was easier for state to mobilize resources and set up the bottling plant, set up this. But in the 7-year development plan, there was a provision that when these industries mature, they will be put on the Ghana Stock Exchange for Ghanaians to buy equity. So there is that. If you take an organization like Tema Oil Refinery,
which has been there for so long. We're always complaining about it.
In fact, it has negative equity. The latest data shows it has negative equity. And so what do we do? What other model? We must be bold enough to try models. You see, the world of 1960, the world of 1970, the world of 2000, it's not the same as the world of today. So which models work? We must be creative enough. If we have to dilute state interest in order for the entities to work, let's do it. But if with state interest, we can bring in good management performance contracts, not those we have. For example, unfortunately, we now know the salary of some state entities.
Is it unfortunate or it is fortunate?
Well, the SIC case.
Yes, the SIC case. I mean,
where we see the managing director being paid about 70,000 cedis a month.
Excluding allowances that she's entitled.
I will not go for that. I will slash the salary to about 30,000.
You don't think
or 25 a month?
You don't think these are deserving of?
No, it's not that. It's not that. We change the parameters. And they make the rest performance based. So he or she can earn more than the 70,000
based on the performance.
Based on the performance. If you do exceptionally well, you and your team, you earn exceptionally high. If you don't do well, so there has to be some incentive other than basic pay. You will find loss making. For example, GHOne distilleries for 8 years never made a profit. Excuse my language. Even in selling appetition, the state is incurring losses. Even that.
Even selling alcohol.
Precisely. Meanwhile, the blue kiosk operator in Yeji is making profits. So what is it that we are not getting right? So we should look at models. What is it that works for the alcoholic beverage industry in terms of management? The Casaprecons, the Lomobites, they are all doing very well. So why must the state not do well if we still want the state to be in the business of alcohol? That is a question. Must the state be in the business of alcohol? Or the state should stay out of it and rather tax these alcoholic beverages manufacturers and rake in revenue for the state? Those are the questions we will have to address as a people.
So is it that with a lot of these SOEs which are not profitable, I mean, it's like a lot of them are just there, they are just there. Political power changes hands, someone is appointed there, they go and take all of these huge salaries, they get into these positions, some of them see it as reward and their time to chop and all of that. Is it a matter of the people who are put there mismanaging, or a matter primarily of the structures like you mentioned, or it's a combination, of both that over the years have made sure that our state-owned enterprises are not doing as well as they should? It's a mixture of.
I think it's a mixture, but there is also the real issue of the Ghanaian state itself having gone to sleep. For example, in 2023, GCB, previously known as Ghana Commercial Bank.
Yeah, now they are GCB Bank.
GCB.
Yeah.
The state has 21.4% in equity in it. It made a profit of 1 billion in 2023 and yet paid no dividend to the state. We must begin to demand. The state cannot be in banking, especially universal banking, and not rake in dividends, revenue.
While the entity is actually in good standing and making profit.
Yes, the state. You see, so, for example, when we had development banks, there was the mindset, ADB, by the way, the Ghanaian state is a minority shareholder in ADB. There was a mindset that, we are setting up these banks and use them as catalysts for development. And so, profitability, dividends, etc., were not major. But the growth of the macroeconomy, the stimulus that they will give to the macroeconomy was the overriding principle. We are no longer at that stage. But have we revised? Have we changed our mindset? Have we consciously moved away from that? Because we've turned them into universal banks.
Yeah.
And so they are no longer development banks. But it's the mindset. Are we keeping them on their toes? Are we demanding high quality commercial performance? Are we linking performance to remuneration?
Remuneration, yeah. So then it would seem as though we need to rethink, like you've mentioned,
absolutely,
the strategy with which we used to run these state-owned enterprises to make sure that they are profitable.
Absolutely.
Do you see that happening, with this new administration that has come, given what with the vision that the NDC has? Do you see that happening with our state-owned enterprises?
Some segments, yes. Other segments, the jury will still be out. You see, it has to be a conscious decision. How many of these entities are we prepared to put on the Ghana Stock Exchange, to subject them to the discipline on the stock exchange? That should be I would want to see companies such as TDC, Ghana Re, etc. We put them on stock exchange. And some of them, we just have to fold them up.
You have to fold some of them up?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Like which ones?
GMPA?
GNPA.
There was Ghana National Procurement Agency.
Procurement Agency.
It's still there on the books. Why do you need that?
But we have PPA.
No, PPA is a regulatory, a quasi-regulatory body. But we have a Ghana National Procurement Agency. Then again, we still have the Supply Commission Limited, Ghana Supply Commission Limited. Why do we need those? Fold them up. First of all, they are
of no use to us.
First of all, they are not bringing anything to the exchequer. Do you still need a centralized? Do you need a supplies company to do procurement on behalf of who? There was a reason for this some time past in our history, but we still must we have this?
So in your estimation, there needs to be a review.
Yes, some of them have to be.
The relevance of some of the state-owned enterprises, whether or not we need them.
Precisely. You see, it is estimated that about 50% of the assets of the Ghanaian state are in the hands of these SOEs and OCEs.
Yeah.
And if you have your 50% of your assets not being sweated, then we have a problem. Cocoa board. Yeah. Cocoa board had been so mismanaged in terms of performance, commercial performance, that its liabilities at a point were so excessive they had to appeal to the Ministry of Finance for a bailout. Cocoa processing company. So we have a number of them that we need a rethink as a people, not just as a government, as a people. Are there things we can do better? And others have to be even strengthened, like the Ghana Highways Authority. Now the Ghana Roads Authority have to be strengthened. Look, our GDP is understated. For example, because we spend so much on rules, if you take the books of the Ghana Highways Authority, you will not find the value of the rules sitting on their books. And yet we spend so much money. So by not strengthening and by not allocating the worth of the asset to an entity, we are understating our GDP. And I believe Parliament, especially the Committee of Public Administration and State Interest, should play a lead role. SIGA must be strengthened, State Interest and Governance Authority. They are so underfunded, they can't do what they've been set up to do. SIGA must be strengthened. But most importantly, our collective mindset should change. We are running businesses.
That mentality seems, not to be there. That, especially for some of the state-owned enterprises, some of them are limited liability companies, right? But government has 100% shareholding, and so they appoint an MD, they appoint a board. Some of them don't have government subvention.
I've challenged that in the past. I've challenged that in the past, and I still challenge the way some MDs are appointed and directors. You see, we create the impression that some of them were set up as limited liability companies by accident. We create that impression. But it was a deliberate state policy to convert corporations by an act of parliament. Were converted into limited liability companies. That conversion seems to have stayed only on paper.
But in essence, some of them still run as if they are, civil running, government work.
As if they are public.
They are public.
Sector organizations.
Yes, but they are not.
They are not public sector.
Yeah, they are private.
No companies are public sector organizations.
Yeah,
they are companies and must be run in accordance with Act 992, the Companies Code. We don't do that. Look, the shareholder has a right to change money. It has to be channeled, and if possible, an emergency annual general meeting. The processes, we have to walk the processes. Indeed, I challenge for example, the power of the Auditor General to audit state-owned companies. I've always challenged that, and I've always stated it's illegal. Fortunately, the Attorney General has always agreed that it is illegal.
Because they are companies.
Yes, and the Auditor General, if you look at both the Constitution and the Audit Service Act, has no power over companies. And yet, arising out of practice, you find the Auditor General auditing companies.
Which should not be the case.
Which should not be the case.
It's interesting that we talk about these issues. With properly managing our state-owned institutions, our state-owned enterprises. Let's remind you that you can buy now and pay later with Sametro. And with Sametro and MTN, you buy a sleek and trendy smartphone and enjoy the luxury of paying in convenient weekly or monthly installment plans. And all you need to do is just walk into any of MTN's service centers and choose your favorite from a wide range of mobile phones on offer. So just get in there. And the best part of this is that it comes with up to 2 gigabytes free data, so you can share your pictures and get all the biggest scoops online for the first 6 months after purchase. Go on and share the exciting news with your friends and your family and stay connected and be on the smart side of life with MTN and Sametro. When still talking about MTN, be reminded that if you're a small or medium scale enterprise, there is a business solution for you. Everything you need for a smarter business solution, all in one package. It's called YellowBiz from MTN. 4G router, Microsoft Office, WebWiz, Unicom services, you just name it. And it's a very good deal that they're giving to you that you don't want to miss, right? And so to stay connected and ahead of the competition, just dial 100, or you can call 0244-308-111, or send an email to mtnbusiness.gh@mtn.com, or visit mtn.com.gh/business, or just go to any MTN office and get onto the MTN YellowBiz. Do remember that terms and conditions apply. And of course, MTN is everywhere you go. We'll take a short break here. When we get back, we'll continue with our conversation here on State of Affairs. Be right back. Welcome back to State of Affairs here on GHOne Television. And on State of Affairs this evening, we've been having a conversation with the Honorable former Member of Parliament for the Pru East constituency, the Honorable Dr.
I'm just Kwabena Donkor. I'm no longer an MP, so let's drop this honorable title.
You know, in Ghana, once an honorable, always an honorable.
Again, that is wrong.
Once an honorable, always an honorable. There are even people who have never been to Parliament who are called honorable. Our assembly members are called, even we call our assembly members honorable.
In the UK Parliament, for example, a member of Parliament, and that was how I used to sign Kwabena Donkor, other doctor in brackets or PhD, honorable member for Pru East constituency. So the honorable relates to
your position as MP.
As the MP, not your name. So if you are no longer an MP,
but you are an honorable man, so
please.
Anyway, that's just by the way. So I mean, still on the issue of these state-owned enterprises. Let's take the you one of the things that you mentioned is that perhaps maybe we should start floating the shares of some of these companies on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Go public, let the public have shares. That perhaps would prop people up to work properly. I mean, we have cases of state-owned enterprises which really are not pulling their weight, not making any profits and all of that, and we've talked of all of that. So would you recommend privatization of some of them? Like get a private man to come in, get a majority of the shares, and government has a minority stake in it.
You see, we have a history where state-owned enterprises are sold to politically exposed people, and which has not augured well for this country. And that is why if we have to sell, let's float it on the stock exchange. If we have to sell. But there is something that I really want to state. For example, in 2023, even the JVs, joint ventures in which the Ghanaian state had majority interest, came up with a net loss of 1.3 billion cedis. And then I started off by saying that the assets of the Ghanaian state are with these SOEs. But if you take the 10 top SOEs by asset value, 6 of them are in the energy sector. As at December 31st December 2023, the last year for which data is available from a SIGA perspective, VRA was worth 71 billion cedis. It was the highest valued
VRA, the Volta River Authority.
ECG 52 billion cedis. Cocoa Board 26 billion. Then you have Gridco, Bui Power 19 billion, Ghana National Gas Company 17 billion, Netco 16 billion, Gakoha 14 billion, CBG 13 billion, Gridco 12 billion. So this is the wealth that sits with this state-owned enterprise
in terms of asset value.
So when these are not efficiently managed, when they are not properly sweated, the impact on the macroeconomy, the impact on the fiscal is so great. And that is why we must get these things right. We must sweat the assets. We are not doing that. As a people, we are not doing that. And some of us had hoped that with the establishment of the State Interest and Governance Authority under Act 990, SIGA will have become the policeman of these SOEs. Unfortunately, SIGA seems to be floundering. It is undercapitalized. it does not exercise its authority sufficiently, to the extent that if you take the 2023 SIGA state-owned report, for example, they claimed ECG made a loss of about 5.4 billion cedis, whereas the actuality audited ECG, the loss was 10.3 billion, because as at the time they were going out with the report, ECG has still not, even though it's a company, and even though by section 137 to 139 of Act 992, their audited financials should be ready by 31st of March.
Yeah.
By June, the financials were not ready. So they took management account, and it's misleading the public. So SIGA itself must set up. Let's empower SIGA. Let's appoint people who have the drive, who have the gravitas to push SIGA. SIGA is the owner of record, the shareholder of record. It's not the Ministry of Finance. It's not the Ministry of Energy. So we must deepen the reforms. Some of them, we must wind them up. They have outlived, some have outlived their usefulness.
What do you make of the NEIP? You know, for example, I mean, recently with the NEIP, they had to suspend all their staff because they were only on allowances. You know, no SNP payments, nothing.
You see, again, it was established on an ad hoc basis. There wasn't enough thorough examination. It's a program.
Yeah, basically.
It's not even a company.
Yeah.
It's a program.
National Entrepreneurship Innovation Plan, to be implemented.
It's a program, precisely. So some other implementation body, some other statutory body with the legal wherewithal should be implementing the program. We don't allow it
to continue running as if
it's a company, it's an authority, it's a board. So again, these are some of the governance issues we must tackle.
So I mean, so in the case of NEIP, for example, I mean, was the new management right in sending everybody home? Well, for the time being.
You see, again, under the Public Financial Management Act, all what they did was illegal. Keeping them there, not paying SNET, not having salaries, it's a program. So why are they not on the controller payroll?
Perhaps on secondment from other places to implement the program.
And they have taken full-time employees on allowances.
So in your estimation, NEIP should not even exist?
It should not exist as an entity. It's a program by definition. It's a program. It could be under YEA. It could be under any of the Ghana Enterprises Agency.
Yeah.
It could be under any of them. The program could be run by any of them. It should never exist as a separate entity, which it is not, except in practice. So we revere in doing the wrong thing. And that is part of our challenge.
But in all of this, there are boards, of course, there are managing directors, but the managing directors have boards, right, that are supposed to, direct, work hand in hand with the managing director to implement, the vision of the company to make profit. And all of that. Have boards that we've been appointing been helpful in the management of these SOEs? Because I was having a casual conversation with, a friend recently, and they were of the opinion that, people are made board chairmen and board members just to be rewarded, and not necessarily because they are going to do any serious work with regard to steering the affairs of the state-owned, enterprise or company.
When we started this discussion, I mentioned the Mozambican experience. Where anybody appointed onto a board must write and pass a certain examination. We have to get serious. with our board appointments. It is, yes, some of the organizations, it's important the boards reflect the generality of the Ghanaian populace. But especially those that are commercial, must have a commercial focus. Any commercial organization, any serious board must have somebody with accounting and finance background on the board. If it's in the infrastructure space, an engineer, architect, somebody on that board, a hard-nosed business person, a lawyer, etc. We must begin to look at. It's not one size fits all. It must not be one size fits all. And again, our media is also not helpful. A few days ago, I was scandalized when I heard on a program on one of your sister TV station, TV station, that ECG is to be sold.
Yeah.
And that some of them will oppose the selling of ECG by the current administration. I bowed my head down in shame.
So what are the facts as regards that?
You see, at the level of illiteracy of some media personnel, the media is to educate, is to entertain, is to inform. Unfortunately, some media houses take the entertainment to be the only reason. And so in few say only concert. If you read the the NDC manifesto, if you listen to the minister's press briefing, the intention of the NDC, now the John Mahama administration, is to introduce private sector participation in the business of ECG. Fortunately, I chaired the power subcommittee of the NDC energy team. And that was what we put in our manifesto, especially the last mile, is to introduce private sector participation in the operations, in the distribution or the value chain. There is nowhere where the government has spoken about equity and ownership. Privatization involves equity, the selling of equity or the dilution of state equity. As we speak, there's already private sector participation in ECG's distribution chain. Look, if you put up a property today and you want connection, the people that if you go to an ECG office, they will give it to a contractor.
Yeah.
Those contractors are not ECG staff. They are contractors. They are coming from the private sector. They are already involved. What we are proposing is to deepen this, especially in the areas of fault reporting, fault repair, revenue collection, revenue leakages, etc. But the ownership, and that is what privatization, and that is why I get worried when people who are supposedly learned, that is where we deviate when we introduce privatization. Private sector participation is about the work. It's about running the business. It's about getting resource. Privatization involves equity. A change in the ownership of equity. A dilution of state interest. But none of this is happening. So you cannot call state private sector participation. Let's take the Board PDS experience we had in the past. There was no change in equity. All the assets of ECG still belong to the Ghanaian state. And under our plan, all the assets will still be owned by the good people of Ghana. There's not going to be any sale of an asset. There's not going to be any dilution of the state's share, the public will still own ECG 100%. And if I had my own way and were able to raise ECG to the level of being profitable, then we could have floated it on a stock exchange. But the stock exchange has rules. You must have minimum 3 years accounts that are profitable. You don't go and put liabilities on the stock exchange.
And we are not there. But this private, I mean, we've tried and, tinkered with this privatization. Of course, you mentioned PDS and all of that. Is that really the way to go to deal with the problems that ECG has of not being profitable, of properly dealing with faults and all of that? Or is it really a management and personnel problem with regard to lifting ECG?
Let me give you an example. When PDC, for all its faults, for all the illegalities, for example, instead of a bank guarantee, insurance guarantee, and all, for all those breaches, all those breaches, at the minimum, PDS increased collection. At the minimum, they increased collection. Did they use any other staff? No. Even the managing director PDS brought was a former managing director of ECG. So what happened? Its attitude, its methodology, its supervision. If we can get this right, as we speak, ECG, according to the Minister for Energy, and I have no reason to doubt him, has over 3,000 containers at the Tema port that they are unable to clear.
Yeah.
ECG signs contracts, and the contracts are CIF. So as soon as the materials land
at the ports, that is it. ECG has to go and clear.
It's clear. It doesn't have the liquidity to go and clear. And demurrage sets in. So why 3,000 containers? If your cash flow can only clear 100 containers, let's say every quarter, every 2 months, why don't we do that? So those are some of the issues. But again, let's also, the ECG is also at the receiving end because it is the last leg in distribution of power. If you take the audited financials of ECG for 2023, it made a net loss of about 10.3 billion cedis.
A net loss of about 10.3 billion Ghana cedis.
In fact, 10,206,797 billion cedis.
So that's almost 10.3 billion.
That's 10.3 billion. Out of this amount, 8,068,471 is attributable to exchange losses.
Out of 10 billion.
Yeah, in fact, the loss before tax expense is 10,538 billion. This is audited 2023. The out of this loss, 8.318130 net exchange losses.
That's serious.
ECG's payables are largely denominated in dollars. Their receivables are denominated in cedis. So anytime monetary policy goes haywire, goes wrong, it impacts heavily on ECG. So we can take it that 80% of the loss of ECG in 2023 is attributable to factors outside their control. But they could have controlled the 20% and made a profit on at least the 20% minus exchange losses. So there's a lot of room for improvement. ECG is losing about 30% of what it is billed in terms of power sales. How many businesses in Ghana can survive a 30% loss? Your markup or your margin will not be 30%. So right from the word go, you are in a loss-making situation. But we have run ECG as a public utility. Even though we have turned it into a company, the mindset is still a public utility.
Yeah.
And that is the crux of the matter, the mindset. Must ECG be a company, a limited liability company? If it must. And we have the same problem with Netco. Netco incurred a loss of about 1 billion cedis for 2023. And we have hospitals, we have other bodies that are not paying. What do we do? If you take the case of Netco, Netco covers about 64% of the landmass of Ghana.
Yeah. I mean, from the Brongafo region upwards.
Including parts of Ashanti region.
Yeah.
Northern Ashanti, north, west, all up. The landmass.
It's all Netco.
Yes, but Tema alone consumes more electricity than Netco. The Tema industrial area. And therefore their lines are long. They have over 80% of their customer falling within the low usage base. But it is the state's policy that Ghanaians must have electricity. So what do we do? And yet Netco is a company. And I've always insisted Netco must build the Ghanaian state for its social intervention. So that there's a budget line for the Ghanaian state to know that it is subsidizing the usage of electricity. So you don't create a company and treat it like a public utility. If it's a company, let it be a company. If you don't want it to be a company, make it an authority, a board, or something else.
And then you leave it for it to do
then there can be a budget line for that. But as long as you want it to operate as a company. And so this is the problem with, part of the structural problem with state enterprises. As a people, we must redefine exactly what we want. We can't have the same focus you had in the 1960s, in the 90s, and 1980s. No. We are in 2025. What is the focus? What is the role of state enterprises? That is the challenge.
But what you make of the MDs and the CEOs that have been appointed to some of these state-owned enterprises? Do you expect them to perform well?
I hope there will be a proper orientation for them. Some go there intending to succeed, but they meet structures that have become untouchable. We must give, it is not enough to just take one person there. You need a team to go and drive through change. And as long as they are driving through change and are being ethical, ultimately the results will show. Ghanaians are a people who may resist change, but when they see the benefits of the change, they are quick to say, oh, okay, this thing was good. And it's just also because we have too many false dawns. Too many false dawns. And management is not public relations. Objectives, strategy, discipline, hard work.
deliver results.
To deliver. And so if you give me a job that has no deliverables, I will not take it.
Do you think that is lacking in some of our state-owned enterprises, that, I mean, they go there and they don't have deliverables or a clear mandate or a clear objective as to where they need to take the company to from where they have picked it from?
I sincerely think so. I sincerely think so. We pay some of them outrageous salaries not tied to any performance.
It's just the status quo, so the status quo remains. So on that score, and we would have to be wrapping up, on that score, what would be your advice to the appointing authority? You know, because the appointing authority will also have to appoint members of the boards of all of these state-owned, because as we speak now, a lot of them are acting CEOs and acting MDs.
Yes, because they are waiting the composition of the board, and others will have to go to Public Services Commission, etc. One of my suggestions would be to take all board members through a vigorous orientation. Fortunately, we have the Institute of Directors Ghana. The Institute of Directors can be contracted to take them through a rigorous and vigorous training. What it means to be a board member, the responsibilities of the board. And then again, we must take a second look at the number of entities. Do we need that number? Must there be some consolidation elsewhere? For example, do we still need a state transport company, intercity transport company, that has never made a profit for the last 8 years or more? Do we still need that?
Well, I think at a point in time, you know, some dividends were paid to government.
They have never made a profit.
About 2 million.
They have never made a profit. The records are there.
STC.
The records are there. They have never made. Some companies have paid dividends while it's making losses. It happens in the private sector. But I'm talking about profitability. At a point when we were young, the only luxury buses for long distance travel was STC. In today's world, if you look at the asset base of intercity STC, the properties, the landed properties, and the return, do we still need that? Those are the hard questions we must. What else can we turn these assets into in the public interest? Not to sell to cronies, not to sell with party apparatchiks. What else can we turn these prime lands into for the benefit of Ghana? To sweat the assets. Those are the questions, hard questions we must be asking ourselves.
We'll have to wrapping up our conversation at this time. So, advice to President Mahama. You, a senior person within the party, you served, you know, in his government before. You've been his power minister. You, by and large, led Ghana to the end of Dumso, even though you resigned before the time, and all of that. What would you say to him?
By the way, load shedding ended in December 17, 2015. That's another story.
Yes.
But my advice to His Excellency the President and his advisors is that let's take the state enterprises, let's take a second look at state enterprises. Those we must keep, let's empower them. Let's give them all the support, let's give them targets, serious targets. And let's cut down salaries and introduce performance-related allowances. Those we have to let go. Let's liquidate them. Those we have to float on the stock exchange. Let's do that.
Very well, Dr. Kwabena Donkor. It's been a pleasure having you on State of Affairs this evening.
The pleasure is mine.
And we are grateful that you honored our invitation this evening for us to have this conversation here on State of Affairs. Before we go, let's remind you of MTN Yellow Biz. Get to any MTN service center, any MTN shop, or you can call 100 or 0244308111 and get your MTN Yellow Biz, which comes with a 4G router, Microsoft Office, WebWiz, Unicom service, you just name it. They will do a great job in enhancing your business, especially if you're a small or medium scale enterprise. And of course, Sametro and MTN say go into any MTN service shop and get a smartphone. You pick it and then you pay later. MTN and Sametro. So don't miss out on that one as well. This will do it for State of Affairs here on GHOne Television. Our guest, of course, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, speaking to us about corporate governance, management of state-owned enterprises, among other things, and it's been quite the insightful conversation. We're back again next week with another edition of State of Affairs here on GHOne Television. My name is Lantam Papanko.